From an early king who may have been taken out by one of the oldest palace plots in history, to a ruler whose death triggered what is basically Egypt's first true crime trial, to the boy king whose body still causes arguments on the internet. This is how Egyptian pharaohs died. And unlike modern leaders, pharaohs didn't leave neat medical reports. We are working with mummies, tombs, and ancient texts written by people who had every reason to lie. And yes, some of these endings are so dramatic they sound invented. So let's start with the earliest kings when Egypt is still figuring out what a pharaoh even is. The first pharaohs. Early rulers like Narmer, often associated with uniting Upper and Lower Egypt, are so early that we rarely know how they died. We know names, we know symbols, we know tomb sites, but cause of death? That info is mostly lost, which is understandable. This is 5,000 years ago. If you died, the official report was essentially the gods have updated your status to offline. But here's what we do know, something that makes the early period feel unsettling. In some of the earliest royal tombs, archaeologists found dozens of nearby burials, likely attendants. Many scholars think early royal funerals sometimes involved retainer sacrifice, people killed so they could serve the king in the afterlife. So even if the pharaoh died peacefully, his funeral might have been the opposite. Early Abydos kings. Kings like Jer don't have clear death records, but their burials show early royal ideology. The king's afterlife mattered more than anyone else's life. A pharaoh isn't just a politician, he's a cosmic center, and when a cosmic center dies, the world is supposed to shift with him. That idea will keep showing up even when Egypt becomes a sophisticated civilization. The Pyramid Age. You'd think we know? But we don't. Now the Old Kingdom, the pyramid builders, the names everyone knows, Djoser, Sneferu, Khufu, Khafre, and Kaure. And here's the weird part, we still often don't know how they died. You'd think this guy behind the Great Pyramid would have an official report like age 68 caused too much pyramid? But no, bodies are missing, tombs were robbed, records are sparse. So for many pyramid kings, the honest answer is unknown. Likely natural causes. Pepi II, the king who outlived his country's stability. One Old Kingdom pharaoh stands out, Pepi II, sometimes said to have ruled for insanely long time. His likely death? Old age, but Pepi II matters because his end lines up with Egypt's system weakening and eventually fracturing. So if you rule long enough, you don't just outlive your enemies, you outlive your institutions. Middle Kingdom. If the Old Kingdom is monumental and quiet, the Middle Kingdom is where Egypt becomes sharper, more organized, more political, and more dangerous. Because once the throne becomes valuable, people stop waiting politely for nature to do its job. Amenemhat I. Amenemhat I founded a dynasty and stabilized Egypt, but later Egyptian literature, especially the vibe of it, strongly suggests something went wrong at the end. There are texts that read like a warning from beyond the grave, betrayal inside the palace, danger from those closest to you. We don't have a modern autopsy, but many historians interpret this as an early case of assassination or palace conspiracy. If true, Amenemhat I didn't lose to war, famine, or plague. He lost to the oldest enemy of rulers everywhere, the people standing closest to the crown. Which is why royal bedrooms throughout history have always been suspiciously dangerous. Seqenenre III. Natural death? Violent legacy. Seqenenre III was a powerhouse, military campaign, strong control over Nubia, administrative reform. His death is generally treated as natural causes, likely age or illness. But he's a good reminder, even if a pharaoh dies peacefully, the machine he builds can create future bloodshed. A king can die quietly and still leave a loud shadow. New Kingdom. Now we enter the New Kingdom, Egypt's imperial peak. This is where we finally get more evidence, mummies, inscriptions, and court politics that feels almost modern. This is also where the how they died stories get extremely watchable. Ahmose I helped drive out foreign rulers and launch the New Kingdom, but he died of natural causes, so we don't care about him at all. Hatshepsut, a natural death, then a political second death. Hatshepsut ruled as a pharaoh openly. Temples, trade, power, monumental building. Her death seems like due to illness. Exact causes debated, possible cancer, infection, metabolic problems. Ancient evidence isn't precise, but what makes her death unforgettable is what happens after. Her name was erased, her images were attacked, statues broken, titles removed. That's political murder after physical death, an attempt to delete her from history. And it partially worked for centuries. Many people didn't even know she existed. So Hatshepsut didn't just die once, she almost died twice, until archaeology pulled her back into the deadlight. Thutmose III, the warrior who died like a regular human. Thutmose III, often called Egypt's greatest warrior pharaoh. He survived all of the fights he's been through and still died of old age, which is always hilarious in the darkest way. You survive campaigns, rebellions, politics, rival states, and then your body just goes, okay, we're done. History's undefeated champion remains time. Amenemhat III, when teeth are a bigger threat than armies. Amenemhat III ruled at peak wealth, diplomacy, luxury, statue building on god mode, but evidence suggests he had multiple health issues, including dental infections. In the ancient world, that was serious. Without antibiotics, infections could spread and become systemic. So yes, one of the richest men on earth may have been threatened by sore teeth. Ancient Egypt, master of stone, gold and the afterlife, still vulnerable to the humble tooth. Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh. Akhenaten's reign was revolutionary. Religious upheaval, political conflict and social instability. But how did he die? It could be that true gods of Egypt struck him down, but he actually died of illness, so the story might meet me half through. But what matters is the effect. After Akhenaten, Egypt enters a succession crisis, and the next famous death becomes one of the history's biggest mysteries. Because now we meet a king you already know. Tutankhamun, the most famous teen death in antiquity. Tutankhamun died around age 18 or 19. For decades, people wanted a dramatic answer. Murder, poison, curse, conspiracy, but evidence points toward a tragic mix of health issues and complications, possibly including malaria and injury-related infection. Tut likely wasn't a healthy superhero. He may have had chronic problems and lived in a body under stress. Then he suddenly dies, and his death isn't just personal, it destabilizes Egypt's ruling line. And you may have also heard that because of Tut's such sudden death, his sarcophagus was actually his mom's. When a teenager is king, every powerful adult around him is basically waiting in line for the next episode. The convenient successor. A senior official, becomes pharaoh after Tut because of that very old age. But the reason he's interesting is the timing. When a young king dies unexpectedly, the person who benefits most is usually whoever is already standing closer to the throne. We can't prove foul play here, but if you are writing a political thriller, I is definitely top 3 suspects for Tut's death. Ramesses II, the pharaoh who wouldn't leave. Ramesses II lived ridiculously long for the ancient world and ruled for decades. He ruled so long, so he died of old age. Interesting that we didn't see any old pharaoh statues, which sounds boring until you realize the historical effect. He outlived rivals, children, wives, and probably several generations of officials. He's the ancient version of that one coworker who never retires and you're like, do you even own the building? Eventually, even Ramesses can't outlast biology, but the dynasty continues, and the palace becomes more dangerous. Ramesses III, Egypt's greatest true crime case. If you only remember one pharaoh death story from the video, remember this. Ramesses III is tied to an actual documented event known as the Harem conspiracy. Members of the royal household plotted to remove him and replace him with another heir. We have papyrus records describing trials and punishments. And this is not rumor, this is ancient paperwork. Modern examination of his remains has also suggested evidence consistent with a fatal attack. So yes, a major pharaoh likely died because of a palace conspiracy, and historians have the case files. That's insanely rare for ancient history. It's like finding the entire court transcript for a 3,000-year-old assassination plot. If ancient Egypt had podcasts, this would be season 1. Ramesses V, when disease leaves a signature. Ramesses V is often discussed in relation to disease. Some scholars have suggested signs consistent with smallpox on his remains. This matters because late Egyptian Egyptian history isn't just about politics, it's about biology too. Epidemics, infections, and chronic disease shaped royal fates. Even divine kings can negotiate with microbes. The late period, pharaohs who lose the ending. As Egypt moves into later centuries, foreign powers loom: Assyrians, Persians, eventually Greeks. Some pharaohs die after defeat, imprisonment, or exile, often with unclear details. A symbolic example, Psamtik III, defeated by Persia. His end isn't well documented, but he likely died in captivity or shortly after the fall. The point is grim. Pharaohs no longer control the narrative. They don't get a grand tomb, they get just a footnote. Nectanebo II, the last native pharaoh. Nectanebo II is the last native Egyptian pharaoh. Persia returns, Egypt falls, and he flees. His death is unclear, likely in exile. Imagine being the last chapter of a 3,000-year tradition and dying somewhere off-screen. Cleopatra VII, the final pharaoh. And now, the most famous ending, Cleopatra. Her death is traditionally described as suicide by poison. The exact method debated, but the outcome is certain. After Cleopatra, Egypt becomes a Roman province. Pharaohs end. A 3,000-year tradition closes. No more god kings of the Nile. No more dynasties. So what do I actually learn? Most pharaohs probably died like most humans did in the ancient world. Illness, infection, age-related decline. But a few died in ways that still feel modern. Conspiracies, palace plots, political erasure, succession chaos. And the biggest takeaway is this: even if you build pyramids, command armies, and call yourself divine, your ending is still human. The only difference is that for pharaohs, their death becomes chapters in the story of civilization itself. If you like this video, check out my other videos about ancient history and of course subscribe for more.